Building $500 gaming PCs is still definitely possible, but when you're using older hardware, you might run into some issues like I did. I mean, this was still totally worth it because $500 custom-built gaming PCs in 2026 are extremely rare with all the price increases and shortages, but this build still cranked out 70 FPS in the new Forza Horizon 6, 74 FPS in Arc Raiders, even 152 FPS in Fortnite. This is still a very capable machine on a budget, you just gotta be willing to handle a couple of downsides, which I'll fully explain. And real quickly, if you're new around here, my name is Zach, and helping you navigate these terrible times of the PC building market that we're in right now are lately becoming what I'm all about. Along with these build guide videos, I have a ton of totally free PC building resources on my website, and we even sell pre-builts over there if you'd rather skip all of this chaos. I'm just trying to help you jump into gaming PCs one way or another, and this $500 gaming PC build for 2026 is definitely an option to consider. Now, usually we'd start with the CPU, but I want to start with the case today. This is one of the rare opportunities where a company wants to sponsor a part that was already perfect for the build that I'm working on. That's what happened today. For full transparency, yes, Okeanos is the sponsor of today's video, but this brand new Aqua Uno would have been my case selection regardless of the sponsorship or not. Somehow, some way, Okeanos continues to impress in this affordable case market because this new model comes out to just $50. There's this all black version, but even some two-color designs all at the same price. The Aqua Uno is a mini tower chassis designed for micro ATX size builds, and it's rocking 3 pre-installed 120mm ARGB fans. In a time where PC building is more expensive than ever, sometimes all you need is a quick and inexpensive case swap to give you that new PC feel. And at the time of recording, this is actually the #1 seller in new releases for computer cases over on Amazon. It's just packing so much value, so it made perfect sense for a build like this today. I'll have it linked down in the description along with every other part I'm about to talk about, and thanks again to Okeanos for making this a no-brainer type of sponsorship. Now, as far as what's inside the case, here we'll start with the CPU, and with only $500 to spend, we gotta shop on a budget, obviously. The Ryzen 5 3600 is one of my favorite recommendations at this really low price point, but the problem is that if you buy one used, you typically will not get a CPU cooler to go along with it. Now, you can buy the stock Ryzen coolers over on Amazon for $11, and that's totally worth it if you don't want to spend the $17 or $18 on a proper ID cooling tower. But before doing all of that, you have to compare the cost of combining both of those versus just a brand new Ryzen 5 5500. When shopping for this build, the 5500 was a bit lower in price, which is why I went with it. The 3600 and 5500 are very equal in terms of performance, but I couldn't find a used 3600 and cooler for less than the $81 this 5500 was sitting on Amazon for. At $81, and usually cheaper by the way, this is still some serious value because it's a solid 6-core and 12-threaded AM4 chip that can hang with even better mid-range graphics cards than what we're about to use today. And by being on AM4, we have a clear upgrade potential depending on how good of a motherboard you pair with it. And speaking of which, this here is the MSI B550M Pro VDH, and I'll be honest with you, future-proofing isn't exactly the priority when you're putting together a $500 gaming PC in 2026. I'd be comfortable putting a 5600 or maybe even a 5700X in here one day, but this isn't the motherboard I choose if you want to go higher than that with a 5800 XT or definitely an X3D CPU. I had to save money somewhere, so this is just a pretty standard budget B550 board. It'll get the job done for us, but it doesn't have many bells or whistles, not even built-in Wi-Fi, so you'll need a dongle if you're not using Ethernet. Totally recommend Ethernet either way, by the way, as a PC gamer though. But yeah, this motherboard does actually have a BIOS flash button, which I love seeing in the more budget builds. It's also rocking a clean and minimal all-black design, so there are some decent pros here for only $75. Next up, we have the RAM, and this is a T-Force Vulcan Z 2x8GB DDR4 kit clocked at 3200 MHz with a CL16 rating. This is actually the perfect sweet spot in terms of specs, and the pricing wasn't all that bad either, at least for 2026 standards. This was sitting on Newegg for $110, and yeah, that's terrible pricing compared to last year, but during Ramageddon, kits like this are what make the budget build still possible right now. One of my biggest tips when searching for RAM like this is to just use PC Part Picker, enable your search filters like DDR4, 2x8GB, 3200 MHz or higher, and sort by the cheapest this price. There's almost always kits around this price point of just over $100. It's not amazing value, but this is the minimum you need for a competent build that can play the latest games. What you also need is some sort of storage, and this is another part where I've personally been cheaping out a bit lately because of all these crazy price increases. This is a Patriot P310 480GB Gen 3 NVMe, and it was simply the cheapest half a terabyte NVMe that I could find when searching for parts. Having half a terabyte of storage for your game library is certainly going to be a compromise, but 1TB drives just aren't really practical in a $500 build these days. I mean, Valve is selling their own Steam machine with this for over $1,000. Crazy times that we're living in right now. The good thing is that this won't affect the performance at all though. You might just have to uninstall games before installing new ones, but at least you'll be able to play them with a build like this. For the power supply, this is yet again the Raid Max Cobra with the Pice typo on the box. If you order one of these now, yours probably won't have this typo anymore. I paid $35 for mine, but they're usually sitting on Newegg for around $40, and it's a very solid tier C unit, which is all we need for a super budget build like this. And finally, the last component in here is obviously the graphics card, and before buying all these other parts, which I tried to keep as inexpensive as possible, I was sitting with around $60 to $80 to spend on the GPU if I wanted to keep it around $500. There's not many options to go with in this price range these days, especially if you want to find 8GB of VRAM, which I recommend you do, but one of those options is a GTX 1070. I actually found this model sitting on eBay for $80, and since it was the cheapest 1070 I found available, and an absolute throwback to EVGA when they used to sell graphics cards, it was a no-brainer pick. On paper, this was some pretty serious value, but this is where we started to have the real issues. If you didn't already see, NVIDIA announced back in October of last year that the GTX 10 series cards would no longer receive day one driver support, but our issues extended even beyond this. When a GPU manufacturer like NVIDIA or AMD stop releasing drivers, that doesn't mean the card instantly stops working or performance just tanks. It just means that the new game launches won't be getting drivers for these older cards, and those day one drivers really help with the performance of the new titles. If you're not a day one AAA gamer, then this won't affect you as much, but either way, you'll have to make some trade-offs like this if you're building a PC on a really tight budget in 2026. We also just had bad driver stability issues when trying to benchmark, and we honestly thought that we bought a bad graphics card when we first started testing. Thankfully, Nick here at the office also had his own EVGA GTX 1070 at his house, which I guess he's just keeping as a memento at this point, but we had the same issues that I'm about to explain with that card, so it wasn't our physical card that was the problem. Whenever we tried to install the latest driver available, either manually or through the NVIDIA app, we were getting hit with driver incompatibility issues, and sometimes it wouldn't even allow us to boot the PC until we wiped the drivers and use a different version. We ended up backtracking drivers all the way to 566.36, which came out in December 2024, and this is actually a pretty well-known stable driver for the older NVIDIA cards. I'm not entirely sure if all of you current GTX 10 series owners already knew about this, but this was all definitely news to me. With this driver though, we have full stability and everything just worked. The only problem is that many games would then spit out an error saying that our GPU drivers weren't updated enough. Thankfully, you can just bypass that error and carry on. The only game we couldn't launch in our entire benchmarking run was Battlefield 6, so definitely keep that in mind if you're thinking about going with the GTX 10 series card. I'm also not entirely sure if this issue affects all GTX 10 series cards these days, or just the 1070, or even just this specific 1070. I really don't know. Either way, with older hardware like this, you may be required to do a little driver version tweaking, so this isn't exactly the type of setup I recommend for a complete rookie to PC building and gaming. For people like us, this is just a normal day at the office trying to make things work, but all of these booting issues made it seem like the graphics card was completely broken, so that may trip up some people, just as a heads up. With all that being said, here's the final parts list of the build, and it's just a touch over the $500 target price. This is all honestly very repeatable right now too if you live here in the United States. You may have to pay a few bucks more on the power supply, but you shouldn't have any problems repeating this GPU deal, and you may even find a better CPU deal which will even out. Now, I will mention that the other GPU that I was considering is an RX 580, only the 8GB version. That one will definitely work as well. This GTX 1070 will perform a touch better, so I'd try to get that one instead, but I know a lot of people are still rocking that legendary 580, and they're usually available for even just a bit under $80. That would be my backup plan if you want to go with something else. But now let's see how this 5500 and 1070 can do with a modern benchmarking run, because you probably haven't seen updated numbers on this older card. Here's Marvel Rivals, and we actually got a very playable 75 FPS. This was in 1080p with the lowest settings. Here's Cyberpunk in 1080p low at 65 FPS. Get used to the low and lowest preset with this level of hardware, by the way. Like I teased in the intro, here's Forza Horizon 6 at 70 FPS. That was using 1080p low and FSR set to quality. For another new title, here's Subnautica 2 at 69 FPS and 1080p low with FSR set to performance. And yeah, just as a friendly reminder, DLSS doesn't work on these 10 series of cards, which is why we're using FSR. Thankfully, this does give us a needed boost in some of these games, so I'll take what I can get with this $80 graphics card. The software lossless scaling might help a bit as well if you need to use some frame generation. Here's the rest of the games that we tested, and surprising enough, almost every game still cleared the 60 FPS target mark. Not absolutely terrible FPS per dollar value for 2026, believe it or not. If you want to see the full benchmarking run with extended gameplay clips, the video for that was just uploaded to the ZTT Extras channel. And now that I am streaming again here in Texas, we're uploading a lot of other clips over there again. It's definitely the place to be aside from this channel, so feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. So yeah, even though $500 gaming PCs in 2026 aren't nearly as good as what they used to be, this price point is still possible if you're willing to make some compromises. You definitely have to sacrifice a bit on the storage and RAM, and also definitely utilize a several generations out-of-date graphics card. But if you do it correctly, then you can still play almost all of the latest titles without breaking the bank. Friendly reminder that links to everything I used are down in the description, and if you want to see what stretching your budget a bit higher up to $650 will do, the video for that build is up on the screen right now.